Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome. My name is Steele Wagstaff, and the session that you're joining today is called Designing for Accessibility, Publishing Compliant Content in Pressbooks. I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us and to care about this topic. This is a topic that's close to many of our hearts. I know that it's an important topic for lots of reasons, both personal and professional. I want to start actually with the concept of welcoming or being welcome. So, the first thing we hope that you all feel is invited and welcomed into this meeting. And there's a poem. I love poetry. Those of you who know me that poetry is probably my great love outside of people. And this is a poem that, for me, talks about this idea of welcome or being welcomed. And it comes from a husband and wife, a man named George Oppen and his wife Mary. They learned quite a lot about being welcomed and not being welcomed through the course of their life experiences. And this poem was written um, in the 1950s about basically coming back from the war. So George Oppen and his wife had stopped writing poetry to commit themselves to social activism for many years. And then they had a daughter named Linda. And when their daughter Linda was very young, though the Second World War started, and they were both committed to their politics and very concerned about the rise of fascism and Nazism in Germany. And so George and Mary discussed things, and they decided that George would give up his draft exemption and would join the war and fight fascism in Germany. And while he was there, he was badly wounded and nearly killed. And when he came home, he survived. And Mary, his wife, and his daughter Linda, they decided they were going to move. They were going to make a new home for themselves in California. And so this poem is about that return and a little bit about that experience of homelessness and finding a home and making a home for themselves. I'm going to read part of the poem and then talk about welcoming. Mary, Mary, we turn to the children as they will turn to the children, wanting so much to have created happiness as if a stem to the leaves. We had camped in scrub, a scrub of the past, the fringes of towns, neither towns nor forest, nothing ours. And Linda 5, maybe 6, when the mare grazing in the meadow came to her. Horse, she said, whispering, by the roadside, with the cars passing. Little girl welcomed, learning welcome. The rest is whatever, whatever, remote. Uh, Later in my life, I met Linda Oppen, and she welcomed me into the George and Mary Oppen archives as part of my dissertation research. But I love this image or this idea of the child being welcomed and learning welcome. And I think that's probably true to all of our experience. There's been communities or there's been times or places where we have felt welcomed, and there's been times or places where we haven't felt welcomed or we've wanted to learn welcome. Our hope is that this is one of the frames and the lenses through which we all can think about accessibility and inclusion work. The story that I wanted to tell, and I'll try not to over emote this time, is we also, my own family, we had an experience where we moved across the country to a new place in the middle of COVID. And it was a scary time for lots of us, and we didn't know what to expect. We had at the time a child who was the same age as Linda Oppen in that story. And he was going to start first grade at a new school where we didn't know anyone, and it was going to be all remote, and it was during COVID. And the big concern that we had was, how's this going to go? What's Zoom going to look like here? How's our son going to make friends and find a new place? And on the first day of class, this man here, Mr. Tom, was his teacher. And this is what he sang to them. I'm going to play this little video.
Sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table these days. Just how you treat me. Just how you treat me one of these days. Tell just how you treat just how you treat me one of these days.
I wanted to start with poem and song and thinking about what it means to be welcome and how it means to treat other people as a way of leading into this topic of accessibility. The reason that we're gathered here, we're talking about this in this particular context. There is a context in the United States where the United States Department of Justice published a final rule, and it's updating the regulations of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Wherever country you're joining us from, there is probably a law or some set of norms about how to include peoples in your communities. There's probably a law about digital accessibility or web accessibility, especially for people with disabilities. In the United States, the new rule specified that all web content provided by state and local governments needed to meet the WCAG 2.1 level AA guidelines by April 24th, 2026. That's 3 weeks from now. If they serve 50,000 more people, or by April 26th of next year, if they serve fewer. The interpretation of this rule is that the regulations apply to all public universities in the United States, and they include content that's shared in their learning management systems. Many of you are dealing with this challenge or scrambling or figuring out how you're going to comply, and there are some exceptions specified in this rule, including for archived web content and pre-existing conventional electronic documents. We know that this is an important context, and part of what we're hoping to do is to maybe shift the frame a little bit from fear and anxiety about compliance into joy and opportunities, thinking about what opportunities does this give us to improve the way that we make a welcome space or do include other people or other people's needs that hadn't historically been considered. How can we do this work better together? So in the Pressbooks context, for our view is that making Pressbooks, the software, and the content published, accessibility and inclusion is a shared responsibility. It's shared between us as the software provider and between you as the software user, the person who's creating and publishing content. When you're evaluating web accessibility for content published in tools like ours, there's two separate but complementary components to consider. The first is the publishing platform. Is the software that I'm using and the reading interface, are those accessible and inclusive to all users? Do they conform with WCAG guidelines? And then the second question is the content that I've created or that you've created with that platform, is that content accessible and inclusive to others? And so we're going to break that into two parts and talk about that a little bit. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Mitch, who's going to talk a little bit about our general approach to accessibility on the platform side.
Thank you, Steele. So how do we at Pressbooks approach accessibility? Well, making our platform accessible, for us, it is part of a larger commitment to open education. And accessibility is not just a test we want to pass. It is not a yes or no question, but it is a living practice and a striving for improvement. Accessibility is also one of the many ways of how inclusion actually can make things better for everyone. My favorite example of this, of course, is are the curb cuts. So the graded down ramps on sidewalks. They are an accessibility feature. They were primarily designed with wheelchair users in mind, but they actually serve pretty much everyone at one time or another. Anyone pushing a stroller or a dolly, or me dragging my suitcase to the metro station. So this effect is now called the curb cut effect, and it also has application in the digital space. For instance, closed captioning was created for deaf and people with hearing loss, so they could watch TV. Today, many people benefit from closed captioning while they watch something while working out or while they are in a loud space. You can move to the next slide, please. On our end, what we try to do is to make authoring tools and the reading interface as accessible and inclusive as possible. And how do we do this? We do it by hiring experts to audit and test our platform, by publishing VPAT reports that allow you to see how we are doing, and by maintaining an accessibility roadmap where we list known issues that we want to work on. We're currently working on an update to this roadmap, and we hope to publish this soon. And we also have dedicated an accessibility product manager to coordinate this work, and that is my role. And back to you, Steele.
Thanks, Mitch. The platform part of accessibility is what Mitch was just describing. So we care about it. We take it seriously. We want to improve. If you become aware of issues, please let us know and we'll prioritize and fix them. The reason that you're here today, we expect, is because you're thinking about yourselves as content creators and have some relationship to Pressbooks. So the truth is that as an author or a publisher, you are responsible for ensuring that the content you publish to the web is accessible and hopefully inclusive to others. Wherever possible, we do what we can to ensure that the content that you publish is accessible through the standard default usage of Pressbooks, but there are places where you need to make choices. And there's a couple of assets or resources that we will provide to help you do extra work or to do the basic work you need to make content accessible. First, we have a guide to making content accessible and inclusive that's included in our user guide. There's a link there. We'll put it, Jen's posting links in the chat as we go, so thank you, Jen. The second thing that we do is we offer free monthly training sessions on a variety of topics. These aren't exclusively focused on accessibility, but there is a Getting Started with Pressbooks training webinar that covers some of the basics. There's a webinar about creating engaging learning material that does talk about making design choices that are designed for what we know about the learning sciences. And there's a preparing your content for publication and distribution, which does talk a bit more specifically about some of the pre-publication checks that you can do, including accessibility checking. A third thing that we've begun doing is we are now allowing network managers to mark books as archived if they are public but no longer being updated. That can help you comply with the law in the United States, and it can also help set readers' expectations about whether the content is maintained and being updated without making it private or taking it down and making it unavailable to everyone. And finally, the thing that we'll talk about most today is we've developed and are now providing a whole suite of helper tools designed to help authors and creators and publishers that we're calling the Content Toolkit. And so you can learn more about that, and that's going to be the focus of most of the rest of what we talk about here today. So talking about archiving books, if you were a network manager, you now will see from your book list, you see what I'm showing on my screen is a list of all of the books on a sample network. You'll see information like the book title, when it was last edited, when it was created, how many words it has. And then there's columns that indicate whether the book is published or private, whether the book is listed in your catalog or not. And there's a new column that says whether or not the book is archived. So in this example, I'm showing there are multiple books that are both public and archived. And there is a bulk action that would let you select multiple books and either archive or unarchive them. If a network manager chooses to mark a book as archived, I'm moving to the next slide where we're showing a banner is now displayed at the top of the book's homepage that clearly indicates to everyone who visits the site, this book was archived by its publishers on the date you took that action. It's no longer being updated. So this is one of the clear marking requirements of the ADA rule. And so this will happen if you mark a book as archived. If a book is still public or openly licensed, this doesn't preclude anyone from reading the book or cloning the book, but it does clearly indicate the book is archived and not being updated. A similar banner is going to be provided on every content page in the book, and that's what this slide is showing. So that's the archive a book feature. What I want to move into next is talking about the Content Toolkit and what it is and how you can use it. So the Content Toolkit writ large has 4 main components. 3 of them are designed for authors and 1 is designed primarily for network managers. The author-focused tools are the ones I'll talk about first. So when I say authors, I mean anybody who has an authoring or editorial role in a Pressbooks book. So you could be a faculty creator, you could be an instructional designer, you could even be a student. If you have the role of editor or administrator in a book, these tools will be available to you if it's on your network. The first one's called Accessibility Assist, the author tool. What it does is it helps you find and fix accessibility issues as you create or edit content. There's also a scanner tool where you can automatically scan your book and update the accessibility report for all chapters at once. There's a link checker, which does a similar function to find broken or unresponsive links. And there is a network book scanner that will allow you to request bulk scans and view the latest reports of multiple books. What I'll do is I'm going to, if you don't see these tools on your network, it's probably because your network manager either has chosen not to activate them or is unaware of them. So if you want them and they're not there, you should speak with your network manager about making them available. If you are a network manager and you wanted it but didn't know about this, network managers have a menu that says network integrations that's available to them. And there's an option here where if it's not active, the content toolkit, you can request activation by clicking this button, and that will put you in contact with our staff who can help you configure and set this up. So that's how you'd request activation. So at this point of the demo, what I want to show is what the content toolkit components would look like for an author in a book. So this is a sample book where the Pressbooks Content Toolkit is active. The first thing you'll notice is you'll know that it's active because the first time you visit your dashboard, you'll see a little banner, a notification banner. As an end user, it tells me the Pressbooks Content Toolkit's active in my book. It can help me find and fix potential accessibility issues. And there's a link to our guide resources. So if I wanted to, I could click that link and I could learn all about how to use Accessibility Assist in my book. I won't read that guide chapter now. I will show you how to use it. If you don't want to see that banner anymore, you can dismiss it by clicking the X. This will remember that choice for you as a user and it will no longer display it for you anymore. So I just dismissed that banner. It won't come back. I can access the content toolkit over on the left part of the navigation menu. But for now, what I'm going to do is just go through the ordinary process of organizing or editing my book. So the first thing I'm going to do is edit a sample introduction in my book. And because the content toolkit is active in my book, I'll notice a small widget appears here in the bottom right. This widget is the Accessibility Assist author tool. And right now I have a blue check mark, which indicates that they didn't detect any issues for me to solve in this chapter, which I feel great about. So I'll say, next, let's move on to the next chapter. As an editor or an author, as I'm working in the book, I'll see in the next chapter, this is a chapter that does have issues. I can see that there are 5 issues and I can see that the color is yellow. Yellow means that they're all warnings that need manual check. There's no red alerts, but they're warnings. In the visual editor, you'll see these tooltips, these question marks and these tooltips. As you're working in the visual editor, you might find them distracting. So there's an ability to click the flag button to turn them off. Now I'm working in the visual editor without them. So I could say, I'm going to add a new link. And if I made this as a link, I'm working as I go. Make the link. And if I were to make a choice to open it in a new tab, I've updated that link. I've created a new link. If I want to turn the accessibility alerts back on, I'll see that a new accessibility alert has been created by the action that I've taken. When an author is ready, they can work through these alerts in a couple of ways. One, they can navigate through the alerts and they'll say, let's start with the very first alert in this. The first alert, each of these alerts is anchored to a particular part of the visual editor, and they all have descriptions and some helper text. These are aligned to WCAG guidelines, but it doesn't use WCAG language specifically because that can be sometimes intimidating and feel a bit arcane for authors. It's trying to use plain language to tell you what the nature of the issue is. In this case, it's saying you have a linked document, but you should check manually to make sure that this document is accessible. This document's a PDF. And I've checked this PDF myself, and I know that it's a tagged PDF and it is accessible. So I'm going to mark this issue as okay. You'll notice my count went from 6 to 5, and that alert was dismissed. I can now go to the next alert. Sorry, we'll go to the first one. And we'll say, there's another manual check. Is this link text a URL? The link text is, and it's telling me this link should be meaningful and concise. Right now, the link's text is actually the URL. So there's an auto fix button here where I could actually edit the link text and say, this is going to be public domain reading is the name of the file or what I want them to click. So I'm going to click OK. And now you can see I've just changed the the display text to a descriptive title rather than a URL. That issue's gone away. I've resolved that issue. I could move on to the next one and I would say, I have a all bold line of text. Should this be a heading? And I'm not sure. So let me think about that. Does this actually need to be a heading? Well, let me click this button over here and I will display all of the headings in my chapter. Right now, I only have one heading and it's additional resources. You know what? I think these other things are in fact headings. So yes, this should be a heading and I'll click the fix button. I'll convert this to a heading. It should be heading level 2. And I've just converted that to a heading and I've moved on and I'm ready to move on to my next issue. Next issue is opening a new window expected. No, I don't want to actually open that link in a new window. So I'll click fix this to make that issue be resolved. Move on to the next. Yes, this should also be a heading. Let's make that level 2. And we'll go on to my last issue. Make this heading level 2. At this point, I've resolved all the accessibility issues that exist for this chapter and I'm ready to click save. This is the process that authors can use or often use to resolve accessibility issues as they go. You'll also notice if I go, I'm going to go to a chapter that has a lot of issues. Hopefully your books won't look like this, but here's a demo chapter that has 19 issues, and you'll see that there are both yellow issues that are manual checks, and in this case, here is an issue that is not just a manual check. This is a known problem that needs to be fixed and resolved. I have an empty heading here. Wherever possible, we've added auto fix options where we try to detect the issue and fix it automatically just by clicking the button to take action. So here I'm going to fix this one, click the button to take action. At this point, I'm going to save this issue and we'll say, okay, I still get 18 to come back to, but that's a good start for now. The other thing that you'll notice is in addition to using the visual editor, when you are a logged in user, you'll also be able to see the issues on your when you preview a chapter or view a chapter as a logged in user. So it's the same tooltip widget. You can turn the alerts on and off, and you can also actually see what they look like in the printed or the web version of the book in addition to the visual editor. When you're viewing these, you can only take the mark as ignored and mark as okay issues. You can't auto fix them because you're not in the visual editor. You need to go back to the edit screen if you actually want to fix and resolve them. But that's the difference between those two things. So that's the high-level overview of how you can use the Accessibility Assist tool as an author to identify and fix issues as you go. The other thing that you'll find really helpful is at the book level, you'll have an accessibility report. It's available from the Content Toolkit menu under Accessibility Report. If you have the full Content Toolkit active, you'll see the ability where you can actually scan your book, and what it will do is it will automatically go through each chapter and run those checks for you and update your overall report. I did that a little bit earlier today, so I should see here are all the recent issues that it detected today. I can view a list of all of the alerts that it found and when they found them and see what page or chapter was it on, what type of alert was it, how many of them were there, was it on a post, and was that post published or a draft post. I also have a table that shows me the alerts by page. When I'm working in books, I like this one because it helps me know which chapter should I start with. It has the biggest number of issues. And you saw that my demo chapter that I was just showing you, that's the one that I have a lot of problems on. I have 17 issues there. So I might want to say, let's start with the demo chapter. Let's go to that chapter and let's work on those accessibility issues first. And then I can see I have 5 other chapters that have 11 issues each. Another thing that's going to be helpful to authors is sometimes to see what are the most common issues in this book. When I look at this, I can see, oh, actually, the 3 most common issues, the vast majority of issues in my book right now are manual checks. I don't think this author was using headings correctly. There are a lot of checks where they just did bold text and it probably should have been a heading. So I can learn more about this issue and I can see what is it this author needs to understand or this author team needs to understand to be able to make their book accessible in a consistent way. The second thing they're doing, they're putting a lot of links that are actually just the URL as the display text. That's a habit that I can help them correct pretty quickly. If I teach them how to do those two things alone, I'll be able to resolve 300 of the issues at probably 95% of the book's accessibility problems. And then finally, I could also say, well, let's see the dismissals. Recently, Steele Wagstaff went in and he dismissed one of the PDF checks because he said, yes, that one was okay. He marked it as okay. If I felt like that was done in error, I could go back and look at that chapter and be like, oh, actually, let's actually make a change there or double check that the person dismissed it correctly. Finally, if this is hard to work with, I could download this as a CSV and I could see that whole report as a CSV, or I could share it with another member of my team who might be responsible for remediating issues or just wants to understand those issues better. So that's an overview of what the accessibility assist tool does, both in the scanning version and in the report version. The link checker is very similar. I'm not going to spend as much time on the link checker because it's not directly related to accessibility, but you'll have the ability to produce a scan, to view all of the issues with broken links, to see the type of issue, to filter which chapter they're in, whether the chapter is public or private, and then to see what kind of link errors there are. In the near future, we're planning to allow you to fix and edit these directly from this view, and we'll make it a lot easier to resolve broken links in the near future. There is a set of guide resources that cover how to do these things for authors. So I showed you the demo, but there are guide chapters which cover each of these things as well. The biggest question is, all right, so that's what authors can do and what authors should do or maybe have begun to do. I want to pause there and say, are there any questions from people in the audience who are themselves authors or creators about how you could use this tool or about things that came up in the demo that you want to know more about? I saw a question about having support or guides or tools for peer review for books published on Pressbooks. That's a great question, Fontley, and that's a little out of scope for this conversation today. I think there's some conversations in our community forum about people have approached peer review, but I think that's kind of a case-by-case basis. We've seen a lot of different people handle that in different ways. We'll try to have a future webinar that's a bit more dedicated to that topic specifically. I see a question as well from Mia who asked, I want to make sure I ask about the accessibility of the H5P activities that you can add to a book. When I last looked, I couldn't really verify they were accessible. Is that being addressed? That's a great question, Mia. And the answer to that is yes, in part. Right now, the best way to check for accessibility of H5P activities is using an open source tool that's been developed by the Norwegian, the NDLA. There's a Norwegian federal agency that's funded both the development of H5P and the development of a new tool called H5P Caretaker. This is a standalone tool where you can upload or add your H5P activities to it, and it will scan it for accessibility and several like usability issues. We are working on trying to make H5P Caretaker available to all Pressbooks networks at the network level and make it a bit easier to use that way. But for now, it's a standalone tool that you have to go and use at the reference implementation. I can provide a link to that after I stop screen sharing. That's the best way to check the accessibility of H5P activities now. Sayed asked in the chat, does editorially or the Accessibility Assist tool flag color contrast and color blindness issues in images at this point? The answer to that question right now is no, but we have some really exciting news to share. Mich and I just attended a meeting last week. We've been collaborating really closely with the developers of Editorially. It's an open source tool that we have integrated as part of our Accessibility Assist platform. That interface, those little tooltips, those came from Editorially. Editorially is planning a major update, a V3 update in the next couple of months. And as part of that update, they're going to be adding several new rules and new checks. They're merging their rule set with another open source project called Sally. One of the rules that will be coming will be a color contrast check that we are going to be adapting and modifying for Pressbooks as soon as it becomes available. We don't have an exact timetable on that, Sayed, but we expect it will be hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. Because that is a real issue. The thing that we can tell you is that if you use the default Pressbooks themes, and the normal headings and text boxes, we can assure you that the default color values should produce accessible color contrast in every case. But we know that authors and users sometimes like to customize things with custom CSS or inline CSS. And when you're adding images, those may not always have accessible contrast. So those are issues that are sometimes within the author's control, and we do want to add rules for that in the future. Yes, thank you, Mitch. Mitch did post a link to the H5P caretaker in the chat. Jeffrey says, I have a book that has a number of hyperlinks that open in a new tab. I saw in the accessibility checker that if readers were alerted they open in a new tab, that would be fine. If I use descriptive links that open in a new tab, that would also be fine. So the answer to this is actually, that's a great question, Jeff, or Jeffrey. We have made a change recently in Pressbooks, and maybe it makes sense for me to show this. I'm going to edit this so that it opens in a new tab. So when you're in Pressbooks and you're editing, you can specify that a link opens in a new tab. And when you do, editorially will warn you and say, manual check. Is this opening in a new window expected? And I'll say, okay, yep, for now I'm just going to leave this, but I'm going to view it in the front end. Without me taking any special action, this is what Pressbooks now does. In the front end, we do add a visual indicator. This is a visual icon for people that are sighted that shows open in new tab or new window. So when they click it, they'll know that it opens in a new window. We will also, and I have to inspect to show you this, but you'll see for this link, there is a screen reader text only. So this will be read to users of assistive technology or screen readers that says opens in new tab. So this link will be announced to both sighted and unsighted users alike that it does open in a new tab. And so you're going to notice there is no editorially flag or alert on the visual front end of the book, but the visual editor in the back end doesn't know that. So in the case of links in a new tab in Pressbooks, you have three options. You can mark it as ignored. You can mark it as okay and trust that it is actually okay because Pressbooks takes care of it automatically. Or you can fix it and say, you know what, I don't actually want to open it in a new window. I want to open it in the same window and then save it. So whatever choice you make, it will actually be as it will use an accessible pattern. But we think that users in the editor should still be informed and know that this is an annoyance for some users. And so you have the information to make the choice that is best for you. But whatever choice you choose, we will ensure that there is an accessible pattern that's used there. Lauren asked, besides the color contrast feature, are there other potential changes or additions we should expect in the near future? There are a couple things that we're working on, Lauren. I would say there's nothing ground shaking that I think is being planned for the accessibility assist. There's kind of minor improvements and feedback that we've got from users on the surveys we've been doing. The biggest things that we're planning are some major improvements to the link checker to make it easier to fix links. And then we're thinking about a couple of new custom rules to check other accessibility situations that people have. I think we're going to wait and see what happens in the new V3 release with all the new rules that are coming. But the main focus for us has been for any rule check that we have, wherever possible, making it as easy as possible for people to fix it from the visual editor. And that work has been done and has been shipped. So anything that can be fixed automatically now has a button that lets people fix it automatically. So there's nothing new planned there. If you want to understand what's coming next, I would say that we do monthly product updates, and that's probably the best place to learn about those future changes. What I'd like to do now is I've talked a lot about the author experience, but there's also another experience that's really important. And this is going to be the experience of the person who's running the publishing program. In Pressbooks universe, we often call them the network managers. In the network manager, in Pressbooks universe, a network manager is somebody who is like a demigod or has admin access to many, many books. And so if you are running a publishing program or helping end users, we want to make sure that there are some tools that are available for those people to understand the accessibility and publication status of all of the books on their network more easily. And so there's a tool called the Network Book Scanner that we built. And what I've done is we've asked one of our colleagues who is a network manager, Liz Thompson, to come and talk about her experience as a network manager, what she's done, how she's used these tools, and anything that she wants to share from her point of view.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Thompson. I am the Open Education Librarian at James Madison University, and we have a very kind of loose program here as far as publishing goes. It's not an official press. We don't have a university publishing program that's really very formal. And so I think I've heard Steele describe this as like, let a thousand flowers bloom approach. It's kind of the way we do it. We open it up to everybody. And so we get a lot of people that start projects and maybe are in varying levels of publishing or approaching the publishing point. So I want to give you a little bit of that background and context so that you know that we have about 20 books approaching publication or in our catalog right now. So that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts as far as digital accessibility goes right now. And so I did initially, probably right after the network book scanner was released. So during the piloting of that particular feature, I ran a network book scanner report on the 20 books that I thought were the highest risk. So they're already published or they're very close to being published. I sent out a reminder to all the authors and the editors. I reminded them about the upcoming deadline and included links to all of those lovely Pressbooks pages in the user guide and in other places so that they could watch the videos and they could kind of learn how to use Accessibility Assist, how they could use the content toolkit, the accessibility report if they wanted to, the link checker tool. And just kind of giving them the opportunity to go in and look and see what they thought what they thought about the current status of their book and what they thought about making changes and how much work it was going to potentially be to meet the April 24th deadline. So today I reran the scan for 4 publications that get the most traffic and that have, I think, probably more significant alerts than the other publications do. And I am going to be sending out reminders specifically to those folks about their publications and trying to highlight and prioritize some of the things that I think are kind of rising to the top as far as needing immediate attention.
And Liz, just for a second, so you know what I'm sharing, I moved
Yeah.
from the slides to actually show on your network.
Nice.
What Liz is describing is because she's a network manager, in the books list, there's a tool called Network Book Scanner. Liz, would you, I don't want to speak for you, but you could explain, I'm sort of sharing my screen, but maybe you could narrate a little bit about what you saw, what you did, and what you're describing here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is a really good screen to share. So my process was to actually go through and sort first by public. So thank you for demonstrating this. And so when I did that, all of the public books were definitely on my list of people to contact, except for the ones that I know are only being used internally. So there are some there that are on the public list that I did not reach out to. Chemistry, that's me, because that's me. But I did actually look at, so you can see on the far right, maybe, I guess more to the right, there's the issues too. So you can see the ones that have 0 issues, I didn't run a check on. That's probably not the right way to do that. But those are those ones that the chemistry, the child and adolescent development, they don't have any external uses. They were just test books and aren't actually in use at this time. So they're not like they're public, but they're not public.
And I just could I just highlight something, Liz, that I noticed that you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
What Liz was describing was, you can see here that this book, for example, Building Community, the last time Liz scanned it was what she was describing. That was, I guess, February 13th. We can see that Liz was the user who scanned it, and there were 39 issues that were found. And if you wanted to know what those issues were, you could click this link and it would then take you to the book dashboard, the accessibility report for that book, and you'd see, oh, okay, here's what those 39 issues are. But Liz was also saying earlier today, she went through and probably selected a few books and said, okay, these 3 books, I want to rerun the scan. And I don't know whether you ran just the accessibility scan or combined scan, but what was your approach there?
Scan. I'm always interested in getting as much information as possible. And I do think that even though the link checker isn't necessarily a part of the digital accessibility piece formally, it's like part and parcel of that whole process. So keeping people up to date with that, I think, is important. And I've also run into some questions about that as far as accessibility goes. So it's something that I've been looking into a little bit more closely and have been exploring, like the descriptive link text versus the actual URL hyperlink and things like that. So in the digital accessibility realm, what works best with screen readers and things like that. So I have kind of included that and done combined scans whenever I can.
Great. I'll stop the screen share there and I'll go back to your slides. Thank you. That was, I don't think there's any chat questions so far, but I'll go back to your slides, Liz, and then I think you were going to say something about, like, okay, you do the scan and then all of a sudden there's a big number and there's that first feeling, right? Yeah.
It's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. That has been the response, actually, after the first email that I sent out to the group, was, oh my gosh, this seems very overwhelming. Can you just take my book offline? And I was like, oh, wow, okay, no. Let's talk about that first. Let's talk about why we wouldn't want to take your book offline. Let's talk about why the sheer volume of notifications and alerts isn't maybe as daunting after you think about it as it was initially. So we kind of taken the approach of it might look really scary, but it's actually a lot of times not very scary. And actually, the conversations that I had with people were before Pressbooks made the update to be able to fix in the tooltip to click that fix button and make it even easier. So I feel like that's been a huge and really appreciated change. So thank you so much for that. Also, I talk to people a lot about, and I think Mitch said this at the beginning of the session, right? We want to show that we're continuously striving to improve digital accessibility. So while there is an April 24th deadline that we are striving to hit in every case, I'm also talking to people about putting together a plan and prioritizing the things that are the biggest payoff first. And so even if we don't get everything done by April 24th, at least we can show we're making a good faith effort. We have a plan in place and we are working towards getting meeting all of the WCAG I'm not going to get it right, the current level of digital accessibility standards, where those are now. So that's the goal, and that's what I've been talking to people about. So I think people, after they take a breath and we have the conversation, they've been very open to taking that approach. And then when they actually get in and start working through the features and the tools that Pressbooks put in place, they feel very empowered to make the changes, and they've just come back with a few small questions. And one of them was, well, several of our authors have left the institution, and so how do we get in touch? Do we have to get in touch with them to make these changes? And now what do we do? So we've taken the approach also that that yes, absolutely reach out to those authors, but most of these are simply changes in accessibility, not content changes. And so we've empowered the editors and the authors that are still at JMU to go in and make those accessibility adjustments. And so not pausing any of this work in order to get approval or to include those folks that are really not involved in the project anymore. Obviously, if they've left the institution but they're still involved in the project, that's a different story. But there have been some cases where they've lost touch with some folks. So that was one thing that I was like, how should we approach that? But that one actually feels very good. And we have definitely been in touch with Pressbooks support for a couple of questions. And that's also been very, very helpful. So I just wanted to share the experience that I've had so far, and that is that on a small network that's very informal, people seem very open to making these changes, and it's been a good process. It's stressful. It's definitely stressful, but it's been a good process.
Thank you, Liz, for a frank and honest conversation about what it's been like as a network manager. I'm guessing that many people probably resembled or see resemblances to their work and their situation and what you've just shared. I want to open up to the audience. Are there questions that people have either for Liz or for Mitch or for myself about anything you've heard today or about what the publishing accessible content looks like at your institution in relation to Pressbooks? There's a question from Kathy that says, how are we handling the links in the reference list? Kathy, can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, I will. So in the reference list, APA style says to spell out the link.
Yeah.
Accessibility says,
Yes.
don't. And so I just keep
Yeah.
clicking mark is okay and ignore every time I'm in. But have we arrived at kind of something we all agree on, or are we all still just kind of cowboy in it?
Mitch and I actually had a little informal conversation about this just recently where I could share what I learned and then maybe Mitch could supplement it with. So
That'd be great.
I went to the APA website because I had the same question, and there's new APA guidance. And the APA guidance, I think, breaks down in this. The primary consideration is what is the format in which this material is intended to be consumed? If it is a print publication, then APA does recommend putting out the whole URL as part of the citation. Because the print, it's not a link, it's just the information that you would need to enter into a browser to find the resource. APA also says, though, that they acknowledge the WCAG accessibility guidelines for the web says that is not good practice, that you should put a descriptive title and then have a URL. And so they say, if the material is intended for the web, it is acceptable to change it from a URL to a descriptive link. So my view is think about the intended context where the link will be encountered and make a choice that you feel is the wisest choice for that. So for example, you could do one of three things. You could say, this is primarily for the print, therefore we're going to only print the plain text of the URL and not convert it into a link, which will be read differently by assistive technology. Or you could say, this is actually going to be a web resource on the web, so we're going to replace the URL with a link that has a descriptive title that's read correctly for screen readers, but that still directs to the URL. And that, I think APA does consider that acceptable in the case of web versions of their citation list.
Okay, that's what, because with our resources that are being consumed both as the downloadable PDFs and then trying to go in and remediate those. But I see what Lauren's saying, and thank you also, Liz, for sharing that, because that's what I've been just unlink. I've been leaving the written out link, but then not leaving the link live. So it's at least not caught in an easy look. But I like that, to link the title, but then go ahead and spell out the link, but strip the formatting, and then it's all kind of covered.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a lot of good suggestions there. And I'm trying to find the APA guidance Mitch, there's anything you wanted to add on that topic that you think is relevant from the support side?
Not really. I think just the link that Liz shared is also interesting with the guidance. That is similar to, if I understand it correctly, but to what Lauren also shared as guidance. So there's a link with that information as well. And
And
Syed has shared in the chat the APA's guidance.
not only was it the exact link I was trying to do, but Sayed actually followed the practice of a descriptive title for his link as he posted that in. So extra points for Sayed, because I was just going to post the URL and then violate all the accessibility guidelines. So Sayed, thanks for being a good example. Other questions that folks have from the community or that they wanted to ask? Kathy says also alt text for author images. Mitch is nodding. Mitch, is this one that you know about and can speak to, or do we need more clarification?
I would like Kathy to explain, and I was nodding because I think I know what Kathy means, but I
Okay,
would
great.
like to give Kathy the chance to actually talk about
Okay. And
this.
sorry to welcome everyone to Fix Kathy's Life webinar. But so when and I don't remember which themes include like the author information at the end of the chapter, but it's not, you don't really see it when you're editing, but it's part of the final export. And I'm discovering that that those images are not having alt text as author images, and they're popping up. Well, it's not having alt text, which I can fix in Adobe, right? When I pull the PDF out and I have to put the alt text in it anyway, I can fix it there. But I don't know if we're working on doing something different in Pressbooks. And while we're solving Kathy's problems, the hooks theme, the headings are all caps, right? Am I doing something wrong with that? Because when I try to reset the headings, it's all caps, and that's making the accessibility. I just really like to have all those little question marks go away.
Absolutely. Like, let me start with the last one. That is true. It is all caps, and it is not recommended to use all caps in longer, right? Like in longer text. Like it's okay. It passes the accessibility test if it's like a short title, but if you have a long title, then it's absolutely not recommended. That said, it's also a preference, like for many people, to not have all caps at all, because even if it passes, like there are folks that have more difficulty reading all caps, even if it's just 3 words. And I don't remember what the exact number is of characters that you can, like, that you would allow you to pass the text. So what we usually do and also recommend is for authors to just apply custom CSS and change that formatting to not be uppercase. And so, yeah, that's something I can definitely also take on our list to discuss whether it's worth for us to make a change there and make that optional. Yeah. And right, so Steele was also like, did you want to add that in spoken word also, what you just wrote in the chat?
Yes. So we're getting a little bit kind of into some of the weeds, but there are 2 ways to make text display as all caps. One is to literally use capital letters. So if you wrote capital A, capital L, capital L, capital C, capital A, capital P, capital S, that will be capital letters in the HTML. Screen readers are trained to pronounce and say all caps text differently than non-all caps text, which is one of the reasons why people recommend do not use long stretches of all caps, because for assistive technology users, it will sound like it's shouting or will spell out the letters one by one, which is not a good experience. Many people for many, many years have like using all caps headings as display elements. The best accessible way to do that, if you want that effect, is to make sure that your HTML is in sentence case or in first letter capitalization case, and then to use the CSS property text transform to make it uppercase. That will not produce the same screen reader. So that's what our themes tend to do. The themes say, enter it in as HTML, and then we will use the CSS property to transform it. That will produce the fewest possible accessibility issues. So when you're writing your text, just turn caps lock off and write it like normal text. The theme will make some caps decision. If you don't like the theme's caps decisions and want it to look differently for aesthetic preferences rather than accessibility preferences, then as Mitch said, you can use custom CSS and just overwrite that rule, and we can help you with that, or you can write in and ask us.
Okay, cool. So like in the hooks
That's
theme, the
Mhm.
screen reader isn't reading every letter then.
That's correct.
Okay.
It depends on the underlying HTML, but if you wrote the heading properly, it won't. The screen reader will say, great, it's just reading the heading. It just displays with all caps as an aesthetic preference.
If I may add something to that, because I think it's a fascinating case to just also talk about how different groups of people may have different accessibility needs, right? So what we just described was how assistive technology like screen readers deal with uppercase or kind of like with these titles, so that the HTML is like it's correct. Screen readers do not say out loud every single text. So for that group of people, that's solved with that issue. But then there's also the question of neurodivergence, where it is like for neurodivergent readers, it is recommended not to have even use text transform. So right, so there's always kind of like different perspectives. So and you need to know also your readership and adjust like your accessibility choices towards your readership. And it's, of course, there are guidelines that help you with that, but sometimes there's like two versions of also like how can you serve the people who are actually reading and consuming your book best. There are sometimes also some judgment calls to make, right? So I just wanted to point that out because I find that is like a really excellent illustration of that accessibility does not mean the same thing for every group that we might have in our readership.
Thank you, Mitch. And I wanted to say, like, this is a really important point because the context that we started with was talking about compliance with WCAG guidelines. Ensuring that you comply with WCAG guidelines is one thing. That's a legal requirement, but it doesn't ensure that everyone who wants to use your text will have the same experience. And that's impossible to produce the same experience for everyone. But you can be more thoughtful about the types of experiences you're providing for different users. I had a family member visiting me this last week who's dyslexic and struggles really to differentiate certain letter forms. Capital letter forms are easier in some ways for them to differentiate than lowercase letter forms, but it depends on the typeface. And so there's lots of different considerations that we can become aware of. Some of those things are just becoming aware of different user preferences. With CAG guidelines, it's not a question of user preferences, it's a question of complying to the actual guidelines. But we can do more than just compliance. We can become inclusive. We can become curious and interested in what different user communities want, and then think about and accommodate their needs in different ways. So I think it's important to distinguish those two, but also say we can care about both of them, just like Mitch was saying. And that's why I'm really excited and grateful that Mitch is now in this role for us. And I think we will all benefit from that in the long run. Kevin, the other question though about alt text for author images, I believe that this is a known bug with Pressbooks. We display contributor photo as the alt text for all of those images, no matter what the photo content is. And that's an improvement that we'd like to make. It's in our backlog, and hopefully you'll have an announcement about that being fixed soon. That's our responsibility, and we're falling short.
Okay, that sounds good. Because I tried to go like to their profile and see if I could like right click and do alt text or in the media library.
It's our problem, not yours. And so, yeah, in this chapter, Fix Kathy's Life, we will take this one. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just looked at the time and I realized we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you all for being here. We want to be mindful of your time and attention. We do appreciate you being part of our user community. We want to continue learning from you and from your users. Accessibility matters. I hope you felt that radiate through to all of us that are here. We know it matters to you. We can only build a more accessible and inclusive world by working together, by listening to each other, and by collaborating. So thank you for trusting us so far. We hope that we continue to warrant your trust in the future, and we want to support you in whatever work you're doing in the future. Thanks for being here.